All right. So welcome back. It's funny, every time I turn on the webcam, I get scared. I see that the aspect ratio is strange, it's square. I don't know why it's that way. So I'm tempted to try desperately to fix that, and then do 100 other things, and then eventually get distracted and then forget to make this, or put myself in a state of mind where it seems like making this doesn't matter anymore, so that I never make it, which I've done 100 times before. So that dovetails into what I want to talk about today, which is the issue that I think every adult, a predicament that they find themselves in. And this is, I would say, 99 point something percent of adults will find themselves in this, where when you're a child, or when you look back on your childhood, let's say, there's a good chance that you can see a version of yourself that was able to experience joy directly, almost experience life directly. So you might have a memory of just playing a video game, for example, and just experiencing the pure joy of playing the game. Or for some people, like for my friend I was talking to today, it was lying in the grass looking at a blue sky and just enjoying that. And for some people, it's sort of, maybe they have a memory of they're just poking around with a stick in a sand pit or in the woods or something, and there's not really any purpose to that, and there's not really any awareness of why exactly you're doing what you're doing, and there's not really an awareness of what other people think about what you're doing. And I think we experienced a lot of our childhood in that way. Maybe not all of it, but if we were enjoying what we were doing, then we just enjoyed it. And if we didn't enjoy what we were doing, then we knew about it. We knew that we didn't enjoy it. And so it was straightforward for us to navigate through the world, at least in a hedonistic way, in a way of, I don't want to do my homework because I don't enjoy it. Someone's making me do it, maybe, but I don't necessarily want to do it, and that's clear to me. I want to play video games. Maybe someone's saying I shouldn't be doing that, but I do enjoy doing that, and so I know that I want to be doing that. It's a straightforward experience. And I think what happens around adolescence, for most people, again, the vast majority of people, certainly for me, is that there comes to be a veil that separates us from our direct experience with the world. It's sort of like we begin to comprehend and see the usefulness of abstractions, and then suddenly we start to participate in the world of responsibility. So this is a word I'm going to use a lot in this context. And it's a kind of intermediary, I suppose, between what we want and what the world expects of us. And that's an incredibly vague and sophisticated thing to try and reconcile with, and it's sort of ongoing. And I think that as teenagers, we acquire this feeling, and it relates to almost everything that we do. So we owe it to ourselves to do this, to do that, to do well at school, or to look good in some kind of a way. Maybe it's, I remember in high school for me, there sort of became this emergent idea that you were supposed to get a girlfriend or get a boyfriend, and that was somehow paramount to your identity, right? And so what you wanted started to become about what you were seen to be, and it started to become about what you believed your future self should look like. And so there's this disconnect now between your joy, your moment-to-moment happiness, and your responsibilities to the world, right? And to yourself. And whether there's a difference, is arguable. But the overall feeling, the sensation of immediate joy that you maybe got when you were playing a video game or whatever, you start to become alienated from that, because you're not connected in a direct way anymore. There's an intermediary, there's a little voice in your head that's saying, why am I doing this? Is there a good reason for me to be doing this? Is there a good reason for me to be doing the things that people are telling me I should be doing? Because you have to introduce that critique now. Now that culture is bombarding you with all of these different expectations and demands and whatever. Sometimes they're sort of explicit, sometimes they're implicit, and you have to have this filter that's going, well, do I really want to do that? Is it really in my best interest to be doing that? And so you wake up on the other side of this whole experience, this whole transformation into what we call adulthood, and suddenly you're really neck deep in these in these responsibilities, and you feel like you're getting further and further away from these memories of childhood that you have, in which you were this person who could very directly experience joy in the world. And if you fail to fully adopt the responsibility element, that can be a positive or a negative thing, but you're going to receive feedback from the world. And as you get older, it becomes less cute. Like, being childish in that way becomes less socially acceptable. So you'll be told that what you ought to do is grow up, for example. Grow up is a really common kind of criticism that is levied at people who do not seem to share the common social purpose of transforming into an agent of social responsibility. So if you can't resonate with that, if you're someone, like, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, that's fair enough. And I think in that case, you probably shouldn't watch any further, because I'm sort of going to start to introduce constructs, mental constructs and philosophies that are not useful to you. And I do think philosophy should also always be something primarily that it should be fit for purpose. So if you're lost, I mean, you probably know watch out at this point if you're lost. But if you're lost, that's all good. But if you're found in this, like if you have found some amount of truth in what I'm saying up to this point, little chimbles. Okay, then what? So what do we do about this? We find ourselves in this predicament as an adult, in which there really is no way that we can interface directly with joy anymore, and we now basically have to interface with the world from the perspective, from the vantage point of what our responsibilities are. Now, this is not always the case, because you will discover a direct experience of joy, and there are many ways of doing that. And some people find reliable ways of doing that, and they tend to be through, hobbies, things that can get you into a flow state. So maybe we find it with our interactions with our friends, or, dancing, music, good sex. There are a lot of ways that we can kind of get out of our own head enough to re-access but it becomes that starts to feel more of like an exception to the rule of the way we experience the world, rather than the primary lived day-to-day experience of what life is like. So how do we get how do we get to the other side of this? Because we can't really go back, right? It's not you can't really regress back into your childhood in a meaningful way. And you probably wouldn't want to either, because in a way it's an affront to the journey that is life, right? You've sort of come up to this point, and I think it would be naive to think that it was some sort of mistake for you, or some sort of misfortune for you to have arrived at this point in your life where you can only seem to interact with it from the perspective of responsibility. I think you have to be respectful and say, regard it as an evolution, and like many evolutions, there's a discomfort that goes along with it, and it's imperfect. You're not in your final form yet. So I think that, where we land by default in this sort of individualistic culture that we live in, I know that gets thrown around a lot, but where we land as a sort of like 18, 19, early 20s, just to pull a number out of my hat, where we land is this state of having an ego. So we have this set of things that we want, we desire, and things that our culture is telling us that we should want or should desire, and desires of us. And that confluence of things I'm calling our ego. And we can basically take our marching orders or our responsibilities from that ego and proceed forward in life like that. So maybe you think that what you want is a high-paying job. Maybe you think what you want is validation from your parents or your peers, or a guru or whatever. You think you want a pat on the head maybe, or you want you want wealth, you want power maybe, or, these are like sort of very strong, or you want partnership. And you want to go that route of having a house, having a spouse, having children, and you're kind of going down and you're playing out these things, and maybe you're not experiencing directly joy from that, at least not consistently, but you have a path, a straightforward path ahead that you are receiving signals from the culture is going in the right direction. And so, you've sort of got this carrot hanging in front of your head, and you're just sort of walking, and you're taking everyone's word for it, including yourself, that you're doing the right thing, even though you're not receiving any real emotional signals that that's what's going on. And I think we can play that out, and we can have a lot of fun with that line of thinking, and we can really achieve incredible things that way. And there are characters on the internet, many, David Goggins is one who's coming to mind for me, who really like epitomizes this mentality that it's sort of this kind of equality of emotional numbness, or ignoring your own discomfort, ignoring your own true feelings in the pursuit of greatness, or in the pursuit of a greater goal, a greater version of yourself. I think this idea has been around for probably forever, and it's sort of been revived in the or it's been interpolated through the kind of bastardized revival of Stoicism, and Stoicism kind of being like, I feel like that's what that's been twisted into, that's what that was all along, which I don't really necessarily think it was. If you really do a deep dive into that philosophy and the philosophers who espouse what we now call Stoicism. But it's a stance you can take to life, and it's definitely something that I think all of us spend at least a bit of time as young adults entertaining. Like, we entertain that idea, and we probably play out a certain amount of that, play out a certain portion of our lives in accordance with that philosophy. But the reality is, if you don't rediscover a joy for life in the process of doing that, then you will eventually burn out. Like because you're not receiving genuine. I mean, forget about validation. You're not receiving spiritual or emotional growth as a consequence. And so this is like a cliche of the Hollywood celebrity who sort of makes it to superstardom and gets all of their validation and all of their everything materially and socially very early on, and they just feel nothing, you know what I mean? And they feel empty, and maybe they fall into the kind of sheer abyss of self-destructive hedonism that comes along with someone who becomes utterly disillusioned with the mere pursuit of the things we're talking about. So maybe they get really into drugs. Maybe they get into, weird stuff. Maybe they get into kind of black magic, esoterica, or, they just sort of blindly chase hedonism out of this sort of bad faith feeling that they can't get what they want from life except by going to some kind of extreme. But once we qualify out of that, like basically once we live that experience enough of really trying to hard-headedly worship the whims of our ego and the responsibilities that it kind of gives us, then I think there's a divergence of path that goes in two different directions. And it actually comes around full circle. And so one version of this, one way that we can deal with this is to continue to operate with our responsibilities as our primary driving force, but to make those responsibilities to others, right? So we begin to try to live our life in service to humanity or to someone that we care very much about, or people that we care very much about. And I think a lot of people discover this sort of a fortunate coincidence that they sort of burn through their teenage years and their 20s doing the thing we were just talking about, and then eventually they have children. And in the process of doing that, they have this feeling, maybe not immediately when the child is born, but this feeling grows in them that really what they want and what they thought they wanted actually doesn't matter that much anymore. And so instead, it's actually what the child wants. And, to a degree, what their partner wants. And so, the cliche there is that they say to their, single friend who's kind of still going at it hammer and tongs trying to get what they think they want in life. They say, oh, look, man, you just don't get it because you don't have kids, right? Now, I'm sure there's a lot more to that because I don't have kids, so I'm not trying to sort of completely simplify what it means to be a parent. But I think that's a perk, is that you get forced out of this mentality of like, it's all about me and what I'm trying to do in this life and what I'm trying to get. chasing cheddar or whatever. Like even things like money, things like success, whatever, they become transmuted in some sense. And even the egoism, because you sort of have this little person who is half you, right? Assuming you're the biological parent. But even if you're not, you're the one who's raising them. You're the one who is imparting your wisdom onto them. You're the one who is caring for them day in, day out. And so you're transmitting your own ego in some sense, projecting it into them. And so you're less invested in your own success. You're less invested in your own sort of immortality, frankly. And that's one way of doing things, right? And there's a more sort of straightforward, and I guess you might call it Christ-like ways of doing this, this sort of Mother Teresa-esque, where you're out on the street, helping people. You're doing everything you can to make life as good as it can be for as many people as it can be, right? As a sort of like Immanuel Kant's utilitarianism ideal, I guess, sort of popping through here. And but that can get out of balance, because the problem with that method, I do think you'll find people do find real joy in it. So this is a way that they can actually break back through into integrating responsibility and joy, because it really does feel amazing to genuinely help someone. It's not easy. It can be deceptive. Sometimes you think you're helping someone, but what you're really doing is just giving them what they think they want, or what you think they want, and you're actually doing more harm than good. That happens a lot, but if you can really help someone, you know it, and you feel it, and it's an amazing feeling. It's a hell of a high. I've had it a few times in my life, but you would trade any personal gain for that, really, once you kind of feel that. So that's one way of pursuing the path through pure responsibility. But if it like what I was saying about it getting out of balance, a lot of people, I think, get lost in the sauce with this, and they get further away from personal joy, because what they do is they start to live their life. They sort of get even more mired into this whole life's about responsibility, life's about duty, and they'll start to claim that they're living life for other people, when really they're just getting even more and more lost from their own true joy. And so these are people who, maybe they have a kid but they work tirelessly, or they bitterly go through it, right? And they go, and they'll say to the kid, I did everything for you, you know what I mean? I gave up everything for you. I sacrificed everything. And it's not even, just children, but they can take this approach to the world. Like they can have they can project this character onto the world of this person who's begrudgingly done what they needed to do, quote unquote, and sort of, that they sort of think themselves a saint in like the worst possible way, where they had no agency, really. They didn't make the choice lovingly or even necessarily knowingly. They just kind of gave it all away. And now they're just like this lumbering robot of responsibility that's just kind of like grinding through life until finally death gives them their sweet release, There are a lot of people who are on some level operating in this way, or they're on a trajectory towards this kind of perspective on their own life and their own love, that's the tragic thing in a way, that it can twist even what love is into this very dark thing. And the irony is, a lot of people, when they get to 18 years old or whatever, they might think to themselves, that person was kind of a shitty parent, or that person was, or someone's like, that guy's kind of a shitty coworker, shitty boss, shitty employee, whatever, because they're not really, they've sort of missed the point of what love is and what responsibility and service to humanity is, in the source of their own, idealization of how much they're persevering through, gritting their teeth through the duty of it all. But you can see that even in that imbalance, fortunately, there's a way through if they're perceptive enough, because they're going to have a rude awakening. They're going to learn the hard way, if you like. Like when their kid says to them, "Well, I know you gave up everything for me, but it doesn't really feel like you were a good parent. It doesn't feel like you were really loving. It doesn't really feel like you were there for me in the way that you needed to be there for me." In that moment, it's going to hit them like a sledgehammer, like that very delicate clap that, they sort of would not, they didn't do it right. They learned that lesson, hopefully. And if they learn that lesson, then they can start to self-correct, and they can realize, okay, I need to bring myself more into balance. I need to adjust and rediscover what it is about life that I do love, and what it is about my responsibilities that I can derive joy from. And, fortunately, again, we're sort of granted this retirement age concept. If you play your cards right, if you're lucky, you live to an old enough age, you don't have to work anymore. You kind of and you don't have kids to raise anymore, and you sort of, all of these excuses get stripped back, and then that's where you can bring yourself more fully into an enlightened state of mind, and relative to, or with respect to, the imbalance that I was just talking about. So that's one way to do it, right? So you start on the road, you experience joy, you experience life directly, your experience, your gestalt is characterized then by responsibility, as you become sort of a member of society, a member of the world. And then you can go off in this direction. You can pursue your ego for a while, or you can go off in this direction where you're trying to basically help people, help the world, be of service to the world. And there's another path, which is the one that I have been on for a while. And this is an interesting path, and I think this is closer to the path of the Buddha, at least in the early days. And it's more of a question of examining the responsibilities that you have, and looking very carefully at each one and embodying them, so experiencing them fully, and really paying attention to whether you think they are legitimate or not. So a really good example of that for me in my life is alcohol. When I was drinking all the time, I mean, not all the time, but every day I would basically, or every night I would basically be getting drunk or damn near drunk. And I think that process was definitely a necessary one for me, for my spiritual evolution in retrospect, because I had to occupy the role of someone who thought that they had a responsibility to themselves to take the edge off the world by basically making themselves numb in some capacity, right? Hang on, I'll be back in a sec. I might edit this out. All right, sorry, my housemate came home. So, all right, so I was talking about this feeling that I had a responsibility to myself to kind of take the edge off or numb my raw nerves a little bit by drinking. And I had internalized that through all kinds of mechanisms, cultural, whatever. I'd seen people doing it. I live in Australia, which has a rich history in terms of a drinking culture. And I also had a predilection to it. You know what I mean? I mean, what do I mean by that? I don't know really. No one knows. I've encountered AA and their kind of theory of like what the predilection is to drinking, and I'll let you make up your own mind about that. But I think I was always vulnerable to it, and so it's what I did for a while. I put the pedal to the metal on that, and I really like tried to get there, wherever there is, on the liquor train. And, needless to say, it didn't pan out. It never pans out for people. And it doesn't pan out for people. Everyone knows that. But you really get the sense when you're sort of in the thick of it that it's what you need. In the same way little Chimbles here thinks that what he needs is love and pats. And probably he does. He definitely needs them more than I needed liquor. But the beauty of that, and I really do think there's a beauty in this, and I've written about this before, is that you when you play that out, it really, the shell or the luster of it that seems to exist from the outside and even exists on the inside for a while really diminishes. The whole facade of alcohol and what it is and why it's cool and why it's fun and exciting and everything, they all melt away for you really in a very lasting way, I think. There are emotional remnants, I suppose. There are like little parts of me that think, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a drink or whatever. But whenever I play that out, it doesn't do anything for me. What I effectively realized was that it's a completely hollow shell of a thing. So there's no, the idea that it brings you peace, that it brings you comfort, that it brings you confidence, that it brings you closer to other people because you can drink with them. I really know now that that's all bullshit. It's not. It's a completely empty promise. It's unfounded. I don't have this idea that even a lot of people in AA, and I'm not in AA, but a lot of people in AA have this idea that they're leaving something on the table, and that they have to stay strong and they have to not drink because they know that if they even had one drink, then it would be like Pandora's box was open and all hell would break loose, and they would be powerless to stop themselves from going on a bender and giving in to this thing. For me, when I drink now, I'm like, yep, that's exactly what I remember it being, which is effectively poison. So I think I'm good. You know what I mean? I don't go on any benders. So I saw through the responsibility. You see what I'm saying? That responsibility that I had to myself to get wasted, basically, just completely disintegrated. It's not present in my life anymore in any meaningful way. And there are a lot of people who are kind of amazed by this, and they go, "What? You don't drink at all?" No, but I mean, you have a beer at. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't have a beer. You know, I don't want a beer. I don't even want a non-alcoholic beer. It's like it's too close to it that I'm like, well, what game are we even playing here? And you know, so that, but you can see that that's on the spectrum. Sorry, I know it's a long video, but if you're still watching, thank you. You know, I hope you're getting something from it. If you get to that sort of extreme level of alcoholism, you can see that this is a responsibility, but it's like the opposite of a responsibility to your fellow man and to yourself, because it's really just damaging yourself. It's damaging your relationships, right? You know, people are famously bad to be around if they're, you know, a really bad drunk, if they're a proper alcoholic. Everyone just looks and they just go, fuck, dude, why can't you just get your shit together? You know, why can't you just not do this? There's nothing redemptive about it. But it's still a responsibility that they really feel like they have. You know what I mean? And this is the quality of addiction that isn't really, it's still poorly understood, I think, by medical science. It's not really a chemical thing. It's, even to say it's like a cognitive thing is closer, but it's not really exactly it. I mean, there's many elements. So again, I'm not trying to be reductionistic, but it's just like, it's this feeling like, yeah, I got to have a drink. You know what I mean? I have to. And there's all kinds of shit like this. You know what I mean? Where it's like, yeah, I mean, I gotta have sex. Like, you know, I have to find some way to do this. Yeah, I gotta make more money. Like this, you know, obviously, right? I need to be like, I need to follow my dream, dude. Because I have a responsibility to myself to do that. And there's a bunch of like really hollow stuff that society gives you to kind of chew on on those lines as well. You know, you should be having kids, or you should be whatever. You know, again, there's nothing wrong innately with these things. I even think, you know, drinking alcohol, some people derive a legitimate benefit from that. But you can see, like, if you occupy or if you embody these responsibilities for long enough, some of them you realize are there for a good reason, and you should continue to expand and expound upon your relationship with those things. And then there are some which are just nothing. They're just a sort of a fiction or a lie, and you had to move through them. You know, they're not worthless. You probably learned a lot from them. You probably grew as a human being in many ways, but now it's time to let them go, you know, and that trajectory of kind of just like grains of sand, right, on a beach. There's countless. There's so many. And you just sort of go, you find one, think, oh, this looks nice. This looks interesting. All right, I'm going to do this for a while. I'm going to, and then you go, oh, okay. All right. This is why I thought I needed it, and this is why I actually don't need it. And you can't really do that intellectually. You can't really just judge things from afar and just go, oh yeah, no, that's dumb. This is whatever. You can, but that becomes a kind of aversion in itself. It's where you say, I have a responsibility to not engage in this thing, or to not try this thing, or to like not ever go near this other thing. And you can see you can see why a model of reincarnation is kind of necessary to reconcile this way of moving through all of the worldly bullshit, because this is many lifetimes this would take to really properly learn your lesson and just next, right? But you can also get out of balance with this, because in just the same way that on the opposite path, you can take on responsibilities that are not really useful for you or anyone else. On this path, there's a temptation towards letting all your responsibilities go. And it seems like the way that you can directly experience joy again, since responsibility is in the way so much, it's like seems to be clouding your judgment or spoiling your fun at every turn. You try to avoid responsibilities at all costs. You go, no, I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want to have a birthday party. I don't want to, try and get in shape. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do any of this except the bare minimum. And it can start to feel like that's what enlightenment or living your life well is just not engaging on this level of acquiring new responsibilities constantly. And it's like all you're doing is just trying to deal with the ones you already have, that you already think you want, wearing them out to be just husks that you can shed like a skin, and going through your life like that. But again, even if you play that game, which you will, probably we all have to some degree, same problem. You get rid of all your responsibilities. You can't get your joy back that way. It would be great if you could. And the release of not having a responsibility, of rejecting a responsibility, is a high, right? But I remember Ram Dass, interesting guy, you should check him out if you haven't. I think he said, I've heard him say a couple of times, what gets you high doesn't necessarily get you free. So you can get high by refusing responsibilities and rejecting responsibilities and feeling that in the responsibility there's this tension, whether it's an addiction or duty, and then the release of it. You melt it away somehow through some transmutation of your consciousness. You go, don't need it anymore, don't want it anymore. There's a time and a place for that, but if you do it, if you just keep on doing that, sure enough, your life empties out and there's just less and less and less and less. And there's a certain line of spiritual thinking that glorifies that. And that's a sort of like decidedly Eastern philosophy that can lead to that imbalance. And you can see in the opposite direction, there's this sort of more Christian philosophy that leads to the imbalance of over-dutification, of bitterness, like bitterly doing what you think is expected of you, to the bitter end, right? And so there's a wisdom in both of these ways, but a potential for imbalance. And there's the Christian part. This is, I think, what Nietzsche took such issue with. This is why he really hated Christianity. But you can see that as you progress down these paths, they both converge, because as you get on the imbalance in either direction, you start getting signals that this is probably not how I'm supposed to do things. And so it brings itself around and it comes full circle, and they both converge either way, as a balance in the middle where you are, and this egoic path that sort of cuts through the middle also intersects here, where you are bringing a balance between your responsibilities to the world, your sort of egoic pleasure principle responsibility, and this tendency towards letting go of responsibilities or analyzing constantly how necessary they are in your life. And that's, you know, that's the bleeding edge, the razor's edge of a balanced life. And I think that is the paragon of virtue as it pertains to at least philosophy and religion, right? Whether you're talking about the saint in Christianity or the bodhisattva in Buddhism, there's something to that, I think. But you do have to move through this responsibility thing, and I don't think there's really two ways about that. And so, yeah, okay, I think that's probably it for now. I don't really know if there are other ways, if there are things that you think, if this sparked some inspiration in you, or if you just made it this far, leave me a comment, let me know, I will read it. I want to say as well that 2 people left comments on my previous video, which was from years ago now. I believe the video is called From One Emperor to Another. And both of those, I found them so moving. And I really appreciate those people for doing that and reaching out and letting me know that what I've said and what I've written actually made a difference in their life, because it made all the difference in my life. So anyway, I'll stop rabbiting on now, but thank you for watching, and I'll see you when I make another video in 2 years or whatever. I'm sure it'll be less this time. All right, lots of love, guys.